Okay, we've got John Sneisen here of The Economic Truth. He's the author of two best-selling books, The End of Freedom and Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, question mark. So he's an economist. He delves deep into the weeds farther than I normally do. So I'm excited to get a general overview of a bunch of things. But I first saw John on Wham, World Alternative Media on YouTube very many years ago and liked his stuff. He's talked with a bunch of really popular people. He's doing some work with G. Edward Griffin, who is the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. I would suggest go have a look at that as well. But it's about the founding of the Federal Reserve. John's involved in the Red Pill Expo, some blockchain and crypto stuff. And then he also has another cool project called the Outernet, a privacy peer-to-peer communication system. So, John, thank you very much for joining me today. And you give me a better overview of the basics that I know. And I'm excited to see you. To start, I guess let's just take it where you want to take it. General overview of the world. So have fun with that.
Yeah. Well, let's rip the weeds out.
Yeah.
I don't use pesticides over here.
Yeah.
Anyways, a little farm joke there, but anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting right now in the world. It's gotten to a point where geopolitically we were going nuts. There's a lot of calamity going on in Europe right now with the Russian-Ukrainian war, with down in the Middle East, close to where a lot of the world's transportation is going through, with Israel attacking everybody around it, and so there's a huge like kind of disaster waiting to happen. Now I saw today there was a somebody kidnapped a ship. I think it was the Iranians kidnapped the Israeli ship. So it keeps on escalating. As you see that, because of the last couple of weeks now, you've seen the gold price starting to lurch up quite a bit. It was all the way down at 1900 American US dollars. Forgot the Canadian price. I think it was like all the way down at 23, 24, 2500 somewhere. And now it's up at 3,300, I believe, or more. So things are starting to happening there, and the reason why is because people are insecure, the banks are, everybody's insecure, and then on top of that, we're sitting on a massive mountain of debt everywhere in the world, and you're starting to see. I wrote a little article back in 2020, and I was kind of warning about a derivative that has been actually it's been with us since before the financial crisis, but it wasn't very prevalent, like the collateralized debt obligations that blew up pension funds and everything around the world. But it's called a collateralized loan obligation, and it's the only difference between a CDO and a CLO. There's a few differences, but the major difference is that this is actually corporate debt that we're looking at now. And so I wrote an article: is this going to be the black swan event? And then suddenly I saw Financial Times a week ago. They wrote an article, "Trouble in the Obscure Derivative." It was saying, and sure enough, it's corporate debt, and is specifically in commercial real estate, which since the lockdowns, everybody fled out of the cities, and nobody's coming back to their office tower. So it's a huge disaster. I think in the United States it's trillions of dollars of debt, and you got to remember in the bubble that blew up in 2008, there was only 13 billion dollars worth of debt in bad mortgages, and now we're probably looking at like hundreds of millions to probably billions of bad. No, sorry, hundred of billions potentially in bad commercial real estate debt, because when nobody's there, the actual owners of the properties, they don't get any rent. So they can't cover their basic incomes, to be able to own that piece of real estate. And I know that you've invested in some real estate as well, right? So
Yeah, well, I kind of got out of it and I invested in producing farmland and land, plant, and equipment, and in my general, like, almost everything in one basket, but it's diversified on the farm. It's kind of That's what I did. But I had rentals in the city, and I'm
yeah,
out of that and happy for it. But yeah, the vacancy rates in some of the big cities that you were saying in commercial real estate is ridiculous.
yeah,
Mailing the keys to like really big commercial buildings back to the bank, and um,
Yeah.
where what else
Yeah,
was I going to say
I
about
saw the
that? Just
CPP. I saw the CPP actually had to sell a commercial property for $1.
yeah, I saw
Uh,
that one too. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, so a lot of trouble there, and so what you see, like with derivatives, what that is, it's basically like an overlaying a structure. So what they do when they create a derivative is very simple. Well, it sounds confusing, but it's very simple. They take loans, and what they do is they create a corporation called a special purpose vehicle, and it's a corporation. It's the basic corporation, but what they do with this special purpose vehicle is that they shove in all these loans, they stack them together and then put a whole bunch of them in there, and now they're off the bank's balance sheet. The banks is good. They're off in this corporation over here. And so what ends up happening is that they even take that corporation, which they can call whatever they want. Like they play this game in the U.S. markets. Like the BTFP was a special purpose vehicle. Was if people heard about the bailout of the regional banks, the Bank Term Funding Program that the Fed did, same principle. Like they just take a whole bunch of bad debt and offload it onto a separate balance sheet, so it looks good, when it's really not very good. And so they did that, and then so they take that special purpose vehicle, and then they add them and stack them on top of each other, multiple corporations registered in a new corporation, which is then creates the derivative itself called a collateralized loan obligation. It could be a mortgage-backed security with residential mortgage debt. It could be an asset-backed security with either car loan, student loan, or mortgage debt. No, or credit card debt. Like they do that as well. They create derivatives out of that kind of stuff too. So, um, and then they sell it to investors, and of course the investors are usually pension funds, insurance funds, the dumbest type of fund managers that they approach. Of course they manage to sneak that into all the government pensions and so on, and so it's a great scheme for the bankers to make a little bit of extra money on top of everything, because when they do that, it's not really that they potentially own anything. So what ends up happening is they give a little bit of a percentage in return, but when income drops from them not being able to pay their loans, well, then it dwindles the income that they promised to the pension funds and so on, and that's when you get the massive blow up, and panic ensues basically, and they sell these worthless, like it's literally like worthless derivatives at the end of it. And
yeah.
so,
A lot of
yeah,
it's accounting tricks that I see. But sorry to interrupt. Continue
yeah,
with that. Yeah,
Yeah, and so
yeah.
what happened? I actually recently interviewed a lady that was a derivative journalist during the 2008 crisis. And what she told me, this is the best and easy explanation of how derivatives work. It's like you start with a good debt, and then you just go down the line until you find a switch at the bottom. And then at the end of it, that's it. They can't leverage any more loans in that structure. And then that's when it blows up. And so basically that's what's going on now. Like it was commercial, good commercial debt, and then they just go down the line, and then now the sewage, the raw sewage that are flowing around with bad investments, that's
Yeah.
what's, blowing up everywhere.
Well, you brought up a 2008, and there's that movie, The Big Short, right, about the housing crisis, or that whole issue there where everything was sort of imploding. And does this sound right? But last year, in the period of a few weeks, as interest rates started to go up, that they spent more bailing out banks than that Big Short movie, Hollywood movie, 2008 financial crisis. Does that sound right to you? Like the amount that
Oh,
they
of course.
bailed them
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, like it was the three biggest bank failures in history. Like
Yeah,
it was Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, and then Silvergate or something. I forgot. There's like three major
that
banks, but
sounds right.
they were the three biggest banks
Yeah.
like in history of like it blowing up basically. So uh and the thing is, it's not like that they're so much bigger per se, but what actually happened is that we printed so much or created so much more currency units. So it sounds like it's a lot more, but it's not really that much more
Yeah,
per
nominally.
se.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it will always be the big the further we continue this Ponzi scheme, it will always be the biggest in history in the next one.
That's right. But I just get a kick out
Yeah,
of it. Like, I guess I don't watch mainstream news that much, but I would say that I heard it in mention here and there. But they call it the GFC, Great Financial Crisis in 2008, and all the incredible like bailout amounts and things, and
yeah,
then last year just dead silence kind of thing, unless it's alternative
yeah.
media, and the amounts are staggering.
Well,
And
the debt levels are like the interest charge on the debt is staggering.
That's right. And it's, one of the best assets a person could have would be a 25 or 30-year fixed, when you fixed it at the 2 and something percent. Well, the banks now have to pay like over 5. So the banks are underwater already. So it's this paradigm. We have inflation ticking up. Inflation goes up in kind of waves, and so it's coming down. We saved everything and stuff, but it's kind of ticking up again. So the Fed should be increasing, or the central banks. If you This is the situation we got. I don't believe in central management of anything,
Yeah,
but they should be increasing rates dramatically, but that's puts the banks underwater even worse than they are now. But then, if on the other hand, if they cut interest rates, then it's, I don't know, hyperinflation. My definition's 50% increase every month. It's
yeah,
possibility. But what's your opinion on the banks and this situation versus interest rates and the
yeah.
options that the central banks have cornered themselves into? They don't have an option. Like,
No, so especially here in well, actually anywhere in the world except for now Argentina that is suddenly running a budget surplus
you're right.
for the first time
You're
in history. What is happening is that any government is running now a deficit, which means that it has to borrow money because it's spending more than it has. Very simple
oh
terms, right?
yeah.
So that's the major problem. But what has ended up happening is that, well, also the cost of borrowing that is skyrocketing. And so what ends up happening for governments now is the interest rate costs are skyrocketing. I thought it was very hilarious when Trudeau is like, "Well, we're just borrowing at zero. Don't worry about it, guys."
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
remember I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, and so it might be that, those bonds that he issued, investors like, oh great, like we're gonna get 0% bonds, these like $1 trillion bonds that almost was issued in Canada and Canadian government bonds. But if you now have them and own them, I think you lost 30-40% on some of those, because what ends up happening is with bonds is if you buy a low interest bond, let's say at 0.25 or 1%, and then it goes up to 5%. Well, now who's going to want to buy your 0.5% bonds if you want to retire and you need to sell part of your portfolio? You actually wants to, take a 0.5% returning bond versus sitting on his 5%. Or just buying a new one. So you get a huge amount of rebate that you have, or a loss that you would have to actually take on those bonds when you sell them. And so
Right.
that is a massive, massive issue. Actually, I have a good friend down in Arizona. I just visited him, Tim Picciott. I think it was back in 2013. He actually asked a question through his and down there they got senators. So through his senator to Janet Yellen at the time, that was at the Federal Reserve. And he asked the simple question is like, what could happen if, we get all these debt at near 0%, and then interest rates go up? You can have massive loss. And that would never happen,
Yeah.
Grandma said. And
Yeah, right.
sure enough, she was dead wrong on that one. And she actually did come out apologize for. Well, she tried at least to apologize about calling in inflation transitory. But he said like, well, I used the wrong terms for the
Yeah.
peasants. Stupid peasants out there didn't know better. So I'm
I
sorry that yeah,
I actually think that all these politicians and central planners, they actually thought modern monetary theory worked, that they could print as much as they wanted, their own currency with no consequences. I actually think that it wasn't evil or some plan. I actually think they were that stupid, John. And then now it's kind of like, oh, maybe not so much. I mean, food prices and housing prices. Like there's going to be a revolt in places like Canada and many other countries, I think, eventually when the normal people are hurting enough. Like not enough pain has been felt yet, but I get the feeling that, well, maybe you guys started to figure it out. Maybe that the voting habits might be better in the future or something. Maybe there's a way
Yeah.
out, but
Well, you
yeah,
had the RCMP was like alluding to that in their special report that
yeah,
they just came
yeah,
out with, that there might be an issue with the financial system and currency and so on, because the loss of, like, people don't really see this until they start to retiring slowly, and like we saw directly, of course, the prices in the stores, but all your financial assets and stuff, what's going to happen there? And look at Vancouver and Toronto, where of course you had the gigantic debt bubbles, because everybody could borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow, and then you have more people borrowing, and so all that currency that gets created chase all that currency, all that those assets in a city, for example. So that's why you not necessarily have a lot of, in Winnipeg or Regina, Saskatoon, you don't have an insane amount of housing prices, because there's
yeah,
not enough of us to create enough currency to chase all these assets to rock up the prices to $2 million. It's beyond insane. The average price in some of the metropolitan cities in Canada. So, uh, but with the raising interest rates, we have seen nothing yet. Like, I think now in 2014, starting in the mid to late 2014 to 2025, I think 30 to almost 40% of all mortgages will flip to a new interest rate
right.
because we got term mortgages. I actually did mine. This is hilarious. Let me tell you something funny. I just did my 5-year term. I still have a mortgage on my house, and I flipped my 5-year term. And they gave me a better rate at the 5-year term than they would at a 6 months term. So I was
Is
like,
there
all right, I'll
okay?
take that. I'll take
Yeah,
that. But I have no issues like paying up to 15% if I had to on my mortgage, because I have a buffer. But most people don't have that. Like, I think 52% in Canada. They're living, paycheck to paycheck. And think about this: when your mortgage, if you, let's say that you locked it in at, a 1% interest rate. That sounds really great, but what if you then have to lock it in at 5? That's 500% increase in your payment.
yeah, yeah,
That is wild. And think about then that, 50% is paycheck to paycheck, and then another probably 70% is then have a very short capital buffer, to be able
yeah.
to eat an insane amount of increase like that. So the calamity is coming. 2024, 25 is really when the mountain of debt that we created. When I wrote my book in 2017, I had no idea that it's going to get this wild. I was
This big,
predicting the
yeah,
housing crash in 2017 because it started to tip. We had the Home Capital Group was a big lender, one of the bigger lenders in Canada, failed, and they had to be bailed out by Warren Buffett. And then right after it got bailed out, they issued some mortgage-backed securities that were AAA rated. After they failed, with non-performing loans, you could get a AAA rated mortgage derivative out of it. So good deal for Buffett.
yeah. Oh man, that's
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of things. I'm trying to take notes here. I could cover a million things, but you said yeah, 5-year mortgage, better rates than a 6-month mortgage. So that's like a yield curve inversion
Yeah.
on just your typical person's mortgage. But
Yeah.
how is the yield curve looking? Just explain what that is. And
Yeah.
it's been upside down for a long time. I don't even know what it's at now. I haven't been following. Like,
Yeah, let me pull up the Canadian one here in a sec, if you just give me a few seconds here.
and what is it a sign of when yield curves invert? Like explain that
Yeah.
to me and people too. But
Yeah, no, so what ends up happening when a yield curve, well, so basically the basics of it is, it's quite simple actually. When you have, when you go and lend to someone some currency, right? You would just basically be like, oh, hey, I'd love to borrow something from you. Maybe you got a business venture, some actually a good business venture. But if I came to you and I said that, okay, I need it for a month, you know, uh, And then you have another buddy of yours that you had some money you want to lend to him as well. He had a good idea, but he wants to do it for 5 years. Now, depending on though that if you had good experiences with him, maybe you'll give him a better rate, right? But in let's say that we were equal, at the time of that deal, and so a 5 year loan versus a 1 month loan, you would think that what would you do personally? Is there more risk on the longer term than on the 1 month? Most likely, a
Exactly.
lot
Yeah,
more
it's
risk.
essentially your return on a longer investment should be better,
Yeah,
like rate, like a higher interest rate than a
yeah,
short term. But the inversion for just people watching is that it's swapped. So, like John said, a a better deal on a lower rate on a 5 year versus a 6 month
yeah. So
personal
here,
mortgage.
here, right now we're sitting at, let's see here, the 1 month in Canada is sitting at 5%, while the 30-year bond sits at 3.58%.
And
And so,
how long has it been inverted? It's been a long time.
oh, it's been inverted. I don't have the
Well,
actual
it
data in front
doesn't,
of me, but I think it's been like 2 years now. Like
and
this is
has
the
that ever
longest one in
happened?
history. No,
Okay,
this is
that's
actually the longest in history. I don't know about Canada exactly, but I know about the United States, which is very, very important for the whole world. And they've had the longest historically inverted yield curve ever. I thought it was actually about to go like close to zero, just like 3, 4 months ago, close to December. It went like I think at 18, like it was still inverted with 0.18%. And then suddenly it just took off back up again. And now it's sitting at like just the other day, it just jumped from being like 30 points like inverted to 45, and now it's down again. It's very volatile right now because of war and everything that's going on. But it's not just that. It's all the debt now that people are coming to the final conclusion that is like, oh shit moment, like we got too much currency that we created, and with our monetary system, it's very simple. When you create currency, like it would be like I have the only $100 in existence. I lend them to you. Um, I want an interest rate because I have risk on it, and so you have to pay me back interest rate. But if that was the only $100 in existence, how do you actually create the debt to pay back? Well, you could get another loan from me with
yeah.
another interest rate charge. So that's basically like if you paid off all the debt right now, there would still be interest owed, and so basically everybody's bankrupt. Uh,
Right.
that's the bottom line of it. But yeah, the Canadian one is severely inverted. Like let's look at like they look at in the US the 2 and 10 year is the most one that they look at, and right now the Canadian one is 54 basis points. So there'd be like 0.54% inverted right now. So that's quite heavily. I think it was at one point, it was all the way up at 1% inverted. And so when that happened, that only happened one time really in history where it's deeply inverted like this. And that was before the Great Depression. So
Yep.
let that sink in for people. And another thing too, there's only been a few times where you had a year where you get severe losses in both stocks and bonds. And it happened in I think it was 1929 or 27. It happened. It happened in 1970, no, 1969, and it happened currently. And so, what is the significance of those years that we talked about? You had the Great Depression a few years after in the 20s. And then in the 70s, you had the reset and removal of any backing from gold and the US defaulting on their debt obligations to
That's right.
other countries. And so we had it again. And so something is coming down the line, and they could keep on pushing this. And if you hear like the World Economic Forum type people saying, nothing and be happy, well, they know that the consequences of continuing pushing this system further will be that point.
Yeah.
Like if you have to rely on debt in order to finance your life, and you will then own nothing, and but you won't be happy. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, they got that part wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, where can we go with this? That's really interesting. Yeah, right
Yeah,
before the Great Depression and right before they removed money from the currency system,
yeah,
Nixon in
yeah.
71.
But
And
also, but
yeah,
also back to like the interest rate because it's so important. It's interest rate is just the cost of borrowing money.
yeah,
And
cost of currency. Yeah.
the risk cost of borrowing currency, right? And so what ends up happening with when you got this huge increase, like you look at, for example, in the United States. Okay, so their cost on the total debt interest cost, because governments, they don't even care to pay down the principal,
No.
the main amount that they owe. No, they only pay the interest rate, cost to it. So nobody cares to pay down the debt ever. They just pay the cost to have the debt. And so that cost for the United States government was $600 billion back in, I think, 2019, 2020. And then now with the increased interest, that cost is at 1.1, $1.2 trillion. So it's doubled
Yeah.
the cost. And it's set to, by the end of this year, it's set to like hit 1.6, 1.7 trillion. And so that
This
is
is
very substantial.
That is huge. Okay, this is pure my speculation and my thought process, but if they can centrally plan and make different rules and change the system whenever they want or move the goalposts or whatever, why and these modern monetary theorists and the money printers that we have in governments everywhere, why don't they give themselves a special low interest rate and give all the peasants another rate? Like it's kind of like when you go to borrow, it's
Yeah.
prime plus something, but I can picture them dropping interest to zero, and if you want a loan, if any sub corporation or peasant underneath their system wants to borrow, it's like 10%, like prime plus 10. I can
Yeah.
see them doing something like that. I don't know. Has that ever crossed your mind? Like,
Well, right now it's actually quite the charge for us peasants to borrow versus, the elites anyways. Like if you're close, so what ends up happening, why you see this huge wealth disparity is very simple. It's because of that example, exactly what you were talking about there, that the ultra wealthy, they can go like Bill Gates, he can go out and then borrow at, near, like now it's a little bit higher, but it's nothing near what we have to pay. But he probably pays like 2-3% no, probably like it would be like 4-5%, let's say, to buy then land. But then when he buys the land, and then everybody else then starts to borrow and so on. But if you're first to buy the asset, with that debt, you will get the first increase of that value.
oh, for
So,
sure. If
but
you're
if you're the tenth
closest
one,
to, yeah,
yeah,
closest to the fire hydrant of the new printed currency right off the press, right?
yeah, so you become
Then you
richer,
win.
richer, and
Yeah.
richer. Yeah, exactly. And you will always win because you're first.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
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 So it's
They're
a great scheme. Yeah.
making the inflation happen, but they buy the asset first and then it trickles down and then yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Insane. Yeah, but I can see these central planners like, you know what? Government, we can't afford the interest on this and we're not going to default and we're not going to pay back the principal or be responsible in any way. So we're going to set our own interest rate to zero or whatever, and everybody else is 5 or 10. I can literally see that coming, and I don't know what that does to inflation and hyperinflation when
Well,
they
so
can.
like, yeah, so how like I have a book. I should show everybody a quick little book here. I got some currency behind me on the wall, but I do collect worthless currencies. It's one of my hobbies.
Yeah.
But I do have a book. If anybody wants to look here, like this is all like worthless currencies throughout history. I got like 30 different ones to show you. But with almost every single one, it's not so much the currency printing from government per se. It might be the initial shock, but what really kills the currency, it's something called the velocity of money,
Right.
in the economics terms. And what that means is basically how fast money starts chasing something.
Yeah.
And when prices go up, it was actually a lot of the stimulus money that came in. Suddenly everybody started spending, and buying toilet paper, for example. Let's do that stupid example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody was buying toilet paper. So it became so scarce and rare that, and the price just skyrocketed. And so that is, yeah, it's supply and demand, but it's really the velocity of money that
Yeah.
happen where people are chasing something. Now, when a currency fails, what usually ends up happening first is some kind of an inflationary shock of some way. It could even be as simple as a massive demand shock that we had during COVID. That could be a trigger, but most likely it's the government has done something, and they print a whole bunch of money suddenly, and then it comes out into circulation and people start buying stuff. Suddenly people see prices jump 30, 40% in very short period of time. And so what that does, it's a thing, a psychological thing in our brain, in like, "Oh, prices went up like massively. What the heck is going on here?" And so suddenly more people start buying, and so you get even a higher inflation. And suddenly you could get to a point where everybody's panicking. It's like, well, what if I don't buy it now? I can't afford to have it tomorrow because the price is going to go up. So that mentality suddenly then creates a rapid decline in the value of the currency by everybody chasing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they printed a whole bunch of extra money. It initially was a little bit of it, but what actually ended up happening now is that all the currency in circulation are starting to change a narrow band of real things,
Yeah.
right? And when they do that, what ends up happening is you get a huge inflationary shock that then could devastate the trust of value in the medium of exchange, which is the currency. So
And what
when
are
that,
people waiting for? Way pre-COVID, way pre
yeah,
any of that. I'm hot potato dollars. Where the heck do I get rid of these stupid things?
yeah.
I don't want them. And
Well,
like,
that's you, but the general public is not there yet, right?
yeah,
When the general public finally gets to that point, the currency's dead. There's no way back, zero ways back. And what ends up happening? All these currencies that I studied, a month to 6 month, when that psychological break happens, when you guys need to follow this, because when that psychological break happens, 1 to 6 months, and it's game over. The currency is dead, gone. It might still be there, but it's like completely worthless. And if you are stuck in, holding assets and the value of that you might be, feeling that you're getting a lot richer, but you probably are not, because
right.
like with that also comes a hyperbolic increase, usually in asset prices. It might sound like everybody's doing well, but actually, if you look at the Argentinian, the Venezuelan, the Zimbabwean stock market, they skyrocketed thousands of percent, but people were poor.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it didn't
Best
help
performing
anybody.
stock market. Best performing stock market is in the currency collapsing nations. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
I just got a point. During COVID, I remember or the lockdowns, I was shopping. I think it was a hardware store or Home Depot or something. And I recalled this couple, just a normal looking couple, and like, should we, it's getting expensive, the guy said. And the woman said, well, with inflation, actually, let's buy two of them. I remember saying, and that was scarier to me then. I'm like, holy cow,
Yeah,
is that a normal person, or are they slightly on the awake side, or
yeah,
is everybody thinking this? Like
yeah,
silver, gold, freeze-dried food, right? Cattle, lumber, like that's what I was scared of. So it's
yeah,
the economic inevitable portion of things, and it's just a matter of time. And to see people complaining about the price of food, the price of housing, the price of rent, the price of utilities, the increased taxes, the regulations, and all this, the price of everything, fast food, like there's going to be civil war, or they're going to lose confidence, or both in the
yeah.
currency, and we're toast. So I guess let's transition. Because we're going deep in the weeds. I love it. But
Yeah.
gold and silver have done their now. It's probably, as far as I'm concerned, they're lagging big time the amount of currency printed in essentially all of these countries,
Yeah.
currencies. But it's the geopolitical things that they're talking about is why it took off. And I'm very surprised during a Democratic president election year that they allowed it to run. Like, I follow
Yeah.
silver pretty closely, and
Yeah.
it's the most undervalued, manipulated commodity, and it's actual money. So it's
Yeah.
for
Though.
me, yeah,
Yeah. No, what's happening is also like it's very undervalued, but what's also happening is it's not just the United States this time that are buying, right, or Canada. Like it's
Yeah.
right now the massive amounts of purchasing is going over there in China
Yep.
because China is having a deflationary collapse of their monetary system. They had an insane debt bubble, like an insane centralized, kind of not fully centralized because there was private entities, running like Evergrande and I forgot the other one. But there was a couple of massive builders over there that were
Mhm.
over leveraged. And I remember watching some stats back in 2018. I think there was a substantial amount of Chinese people owning five, six homes or apartments mostly. And like no, sorry, five, six apartments that people own. A substantial amount of people, I think it was like 8% of the population owning above five to six. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, so like what has ended up happening there is a massive debt bubble. But what happened in 2015 there is they started to issue something called mortgage-backed securities. And
Yeah.
where are those mortgage-backed securities sitting now in pension funds around the world? And so
Yeah.
on. So they got another. So it's not just like the crisis has started over there. It's been there for like, and they did the most dumbest thing ever. We did a lot of very, 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 very stupid things in COVID. A lot of Western nations, but they did an even more insane, dumb thing by completely locking down the country. And of course now they're paying huge ramifications of it. Not only for like the distrust in the China as a country because they shut down and everybody is reliant on cheap crap from China, but now also everybody's slowly exodusing out of producing things in China. There's still a ton being produced there, but you see a slow move kind of out of that. But what people don't understand is like, yeah, we could take production back home. That's totally fine. And I'm all for it. But people got to then recognize that you are not going to pay the same price for
Oh no.
those
Yeah, 5 to 10x on average. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
if you want to produce and unless government gets out of the way and we kind of
Well, we could
open up
cut
the free market. Yeah.
prices by 60% probably if we eliminated government from the equation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is very serious for think about that, people. Uh, we could actually cut potentially like our prices drastically by removing the government itself because a huge, huge, huge portion of the inflationary pressures comes from increasing prices. But yeah, it's the increased supply of currency chasing it, but it's also the massive increase in taxes. Here in Canada, we have the beloved carbon tax from our good narcissist in chief, Trudeau over there, and what's interesting about carbon tax? Let's look at that quickly because it's going to tax CO2. First, CO2. If we eliminate CO2, your greenhouse wouldn't do very well, would it?
Yeah. I just watched Jordan Peterson
Yeah,
yesterday interviewed the founder of Greenpeace,
yeah,
and I'm on the same page with like carbon dioxide is life gas. We're
hmm
doing a benefit by in a cold cycle, like giving off more carbon dioxide, so at least we don't go to extinction level,
yeah,
150 parts per million. And it drives me absolutely insane. And that they tax the crap out of it, like steal your money to go set it on fire in front of me in the yard. Like that's
yeah,
what government does. Steal and set it on fire. My 2-year-old or
yeah.
4-year-old kids say that's like
I love it. I love
uh,
it. Yeah, I know it's very like the carbon tax is probably one of the most intelligent things the government has ever done to steal money from us, I would say.
yeah,
Because you
yeah,
got to remember what CO2 is it comes out of everybody. When we breathe, and when our animals breathe, they breathe out CO2, and then we fuel the plants to then give us back life-saving oxygen, so it keeps us alive.
yeah.
And
Yeah, and
yeah,
when you can't see something, it makes sense to tax it. That's essentially what it is. It's some invisible boogeyman
yeah.
that's going to come and hurt us. So let's tax it, and the government will save it. I'm surprised there's not a tax on the sun yet, to be
Well,
perfectly honest.
actually,
But
wait. We're getting there.
they're
Hold on
taxing
a moment.
the rain
Yeah.
in Toronto. The mayor is taxing
Oh,
the rain now.
yes. Yeah,
So
and that's kind of been like a try to but well, look at California, for example, right? In California, you're not allowed to collect rainwater because that's frowned upon. Uh, and then you also they're coming after the local, backyard gardener. Got to register with the the what is it USDA. You got to register your little garden in the back, because we've got to make sure that you do it properly, so you don't poison yourself with something. But then I remember, so we had the COVID lockdowns, right? And then I think it was in 2019. It was right before the COVID lockdowns, the government lockdowns. Um, we saw something come. I think it was like VBSCB or something. It's a NGO that basically is run by all these like big corporations that are coming together and be like, oh, how can we worship climate more? And so what they'd written an article, and it was funny. We put it out there, a whole bunch of alternative media, and then suddenly it just disappeared. But then magically it was back after the storm, of it disappeared. Oh, everybody talking about it. It magically reappeared at the same place.
Yeah.
But in that article, they're talking about climate lockdowns.
Yeah.
And wait for it, there's a little known place. No, wait, it's Germany. Germany's transport minister says that we need to stop driving on weekends, and we really got to look at starting to enforce that.
Oh boy.
When the poor peasants, have worked their hard asses off, through the day, the poor blue collar workers, and then you come to the weekend, you want to go to that, take your camper or something. No, stay at home, you dirty peasant.
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know where people's line in the sand is. I can't believe it what happens. I essentially turn off the mainstream media, John, and I go cut the grass and look after the cows and pigs and do my own thing and just kind of
Yeah,
wait for it all to fall apart. Like,
yeah, as long as the government, I like it as long as the government doesn't come or I see government around me. I'm very happy. And
yeah,
usually you do that by living outside of the city limits. And I live quite a bit, like I live like 70 kilometers outside of the city. So it's quite nice. And it's, we got a smaller, bigger town here. But again, the only thing we see is like they come and grade the road. Actually, I got a tiny little bit of my taxpayers' money worth the other day because I'm the lowest property on the little place that I live here, and so one of the culverts were blocked, and it just backfed right into my property, and I had pups running, couldn't get rid of it fast enough, and so I got a little bit of taxpayers' money on a Sunday that came out,
a
luckily, and
service, you
it
say?
saved me.
Wow,
Yeah,
yeah.
sir. So that was nice. But
What's yeah.
yeah,
Sorry. Well, okay. Literally, yeah, there's a meme about statists. It's but without government, who would build the roads? And they're like holding a road like a baby, right?
yeah.
And then one of Trudeau's minion right hand guys, I forget his name or whatever, but said that they're thinking about stopping funding any road construction and maintenance. Like
Yeah.
literally, he said that out loud. I'm like, what?
Well,
It's
I
like
think
the one thing that maybe that's
yeah.
accomplished.
No, no roads for you, like the
Yeah,
soup Nazi in Seinfeld.
yeah,
No soup.
yeah. You just
Yeah,
pay
it's
no services at all. Yeah, like my representation in government at this point is zero. I have no representation. I get nothing out of it. Like the
well,
healthcare is
I
crap. We
yeah,
homeschool our kids, man.
yeah.
Like they grade the roads for an astronomical amount of money that I pay for that, but no garbage, no water, no nothing. I literally get nothing. It's insane.
Well,
So
they built a sewage system here that none of us hooked up to almost. So,
yeah.
but I get the pleasure of seeing the interest rates charge on it on my property tax that
Yeah,
I have
right.
to pay.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, the property tax. That's another scum tax because it basically makes you a peasant on your own land.
I
With
don't
having to pay
yeah.
property tax
I
because yeah,
understand, like in a good community that you have your school and you have your roads and there is things to maintain. I understand it, but the fact is, if you have a piece of land and that's your piece, that forever and ever it has a property tax liability, and you're essentially renting it from your
yeah.
overlords. You are. So obviously me
I think
voluntary everything, but yeah.
yeah, I think you could fix, like, if people really want government so bad. I got a great idea actually, and I think it's just one tax, and it's a consumption tax.
Oh, that
It
would
would be
be
the
so good.
fairest. It would be the
Yeah.
fairest tax you could ever have because, well, if you want to buy something and consume, we're all equal. If you buy less, yeah, you pay less, right?
Yeah.
So like the poor people that don't produce much, because they don't want to, well, you get to pay less tax,
And
because you
and
don't produce.
everybody complains about the entrepreneurs like Elon Musk's and Steve Bezos's, oh, all their money and stuff. Well, if he doesn't want to spend it, then he doesn't have to pay tax. He can reinvest
Yeah.
it and make your everyone's lives better that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, uh, I'm done. Why even bother try to explain that to people at this point?
Yeah.
Like, gotta wait till the pain needs to exceed.
Yeah.
It's got to get worse for the average person yet. So that's why I'm voting Trudeau. When's the election? Yeah, next time. I think another 4 year little shot or something that might be enough pain that then you could rebuild after the out
Well,
of the
I
ashes
am.
or something.
Yeah, recently I had a new we got a new employee where I work, and it's interesting. He's actually from Ukraine, but he's actually not one of those that came over. He came over 20 years ago, but he actually grew up in the Soviet Union, and we got the pleasure to drive 9 hours each way up to north here, and so 18 hours of actually intellectual. I was surprised intellectual conversation with the former assistant professor from a communist university in Kiev. And so it was quite pressure, but he's an electrician.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but he was telling me about communist Russia and how it was, and he is very scared of where we're at right now. He's like, it's a complete parallel with what they're doing, both in the universities, and they're far, far ahead. Oh, so the problem is they brainwashed a lot of the kids, right? And now the kids are coming in, and that's what you see all this push for climate and everything legislation that comes from that brainwashing that's been ongoing for decades. And so like that's where you see the remnant, and then so now you're basically seeing the strong hands starting to come in with all this legislation. You know, there's legislation that somebody pushed forward that, oh, if you are a Christian and you want to pray in public, or you want to, read the Bible in public, no, you could end up in prison.
Yeah.
And that was the same in Russia as well. So all this stuff a lot of totalitarianism is creeping in here in Canada, and so people need to know that. And if you don't do anything about it, so there's two things here. There's the thing of, the socialist pressure that have destroyed and oppressed you, and that's what ended up happening. They got rid of all those people in the Eastern European countries, right? So now they're more like conservative, or they want smaller government. While in uh, Argentina, they had just had the same thing happen where, and guess what? Guess who voted for Javier Milei in Argentina? It wasn't the old guys. It was the boomers, because they wanted the socialist welfare going. It was actually the young people that voted, like the under 30. That was a huge portion of the people that actually put Javier Milei in, and they're getting very happy because people are just fed up with what's going on. The economy is strangled because the bigger the government becomes, it just eats up more and more of the size of the economy. And so there's less and less productive means, less and less opportunity, less and less, money to be made for people. And of course, they start printing money through all this deficit spending, but it doesn't get, spent and used in productive manners. It's just become extremely destructive, and people losing their purchasing power, getting poorer and poorer. And so the result is basically, like, for Canada, that's where we're heading. Like, for people that are not aware, that's where you're heading. Like, if you think that you're heading anywhere else than prosperity, like not like losing your prosperity, that you are going there.
Yeah.
Like, history has hundreds of examples of this dumb idea of big government. And I come from Norway. I grew up in Norway for 25 years. And Norway was really bad with big government. Now there's really starting to collapse slowly in Norway. Like, and Norway has very huge correlation to Venezuela. Norway is old country. haven't been productive, creating all like look at Norway versus Sweden. Very interesting combination there. Sweden didn't have any like a lot of natural resources. Well, what they did is they actually have like five or I think almost a dozen big corporations around the world that are quite successful, like IKEA, Volvo. Still Saab is still around. You got a whole bunch of other ones as well from there. But so what ended up happening is they became very productive and industrious, while the Norwegians have very few in international companies around, and the ones that are international are actually half state owned, like our Equinor, which is our oil company. They're in the back in oil fields and so on, but they're partly state owned, not like actually run by a a person or a capitalist that runs them. It's the government. So huge, like you see the big differences there. And in Norway, it's even worse than in Canada. We think that Canada is bad. Norway was like really, really bad, and it's starting to get even worse. But Canada is catching up very fast. And I was like, yeah, this is like that's why I wrote my book, to warn people. It's like I know exactly where we're going here. And sure enough,
I do too.
on
I do.
steroids, on steroids. I couldn't predict the insanity that has been going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's any. It's so intertwined in people, and everybody's so brainwashed or in their lives, and they'll do whatever they have to do. I mean, like in Canada, the percentage of government workers. Let's talk about this,
Yeah,
and the United States. Well, first of all, I had a few points that we didn't get to, but
please.
our GDP in the States as well. What's in there to prop up our GDP is, guess what? Government spending. Without that in the gross domestic product statistics,
Yeah,
where would we be? It's insanely bad. But in Canada, 1/5 of the Canadian workforce is government now.
yeah.
And the average government employee, like it's welfare and economics, but they get paid 30% more. And I know you don't really have to produce value. It's quite a bit different than the private sector kind of thing. It's bad.
Well,
I
here's some numbers. Let's throw some numbers for people
Okay.
so they understand the growth. And this is just in 1 year. I'm looking at the Stats Canada stats here. And so in 1 year, the actual, so this is what has happened. So we added, let's see, it changed to thousands. Yeah, so that's what we want. So they added 200, so there's like 202,000 jobs that was added in government. Meanwhile, 141,000 and 300 was added in the private sector. So the government grew at a way faster scale than the government, and that was at a year-over-year change of 4.8% increase in government employees. Um, and so like it's still not like a substantial number, it sounds like, because it went from 4.39 million to 4.40, and a little bit above million. And then the private sector employees went from 13.34 million to 13.35. But what was really disturbing was the actual self-employed people. They dropped by 19,000, Dean.
Holy
19,000.
cow.
And they dropped off. And guess what? Where do you think the self-employed people went? Did they just like become unemployed, or maybe they left the country? A lot of them.
Well, if
How about
you're
that?
if you're a business owner, I look at some of these other countries and I love learning about history, but in the Cuban Revolution, for instance, all the buildings and businesses and things were just left, anything that couldn't be taken, and all
Yeah.
the business owners and property owners, they left, and what's left is these some of the infrastructure, and then you know, I love government people, right? Like literally. And I don't
Uh,
know. I don't know where
no,
to
but
go.
that's
Like
listen,
yeah,
dude, that's what happens with every country that fails is
yeah,
first the productive people, the business class leaves, and then you have the productive individuals leave. But now we got a global phenomenon, so it's like it doesn't really matter where the heck you go today.
yeah.
It's equally crappy. Very few countries that are any good. There might be some hope in Argentina,
Yeah.
like if he could get reelected again and then do something more. But he's fighting an uphill battle because he only has like a little portion of the government itself that he has in parliament. So he is, not able to push through the really big bills. He could cut government, which is great, but he can't
Yeah.
really, like, he wants to privatize everything and do that stuff. So I think the only way to really do it is basically to try to like revive it locally, like the and educate people. Like I don't see any way, and then have a community of people, at least within like closer proximity that you could, talk and deal with during like whatever craziness is coming our way. Because if you don't have that, you have nothing. Like I don't know if you said, do you follow George Gammon at all? Um,
Uh, Occasionally, the rebel
yeah.
capitalist. Yeah. Yeah.
But what I liked just recently is he went on a tour from Colombia. He traveled all the way down to Argentina to visit Doug Casey. Doug Casey is a
Yeah.
famous anarcho-capitalist.
I know
Uh,
Doug Casey. Yeah.
yeah. But what was very interesting is a warning sign to people if they don't have infrastructure set up of people to deal with. And, if you wanted to get rid of your silver or gold, you need to have somebody around you that you could be able to deal with. You also need to be able to trade with people and be able to not be in the banking system. Because when he traveled through Argentina, there was every morning a massive lineup outside of the ATM, people trying to get cash because in Argentina they put in capital controls so you could only get out $40 worth of pesos. And so when those come, and that happened in Nigeria as well, and a few other countries just recently, like Cyprus in 2013 and so on, where they put those limits on, that's when you're basically screwed. If you are not outside of the system at all, you're really, really screwed. And then you're trying to like, if you then get a hyperinflationary scenario where currency is collapsing, people are just trying to like you can't even get rid of your gold or silver to be able to get the currency to buy something, right? So, but what ends up happening with the gold and silver portion of it? And this is from another hyperinflationary example, and this was in Yugoslavia. A friend of mine lived through it in 1992. What he was telling me is like he lived on a farm. He was okay during the hyperinflation because they could feed themselves. But what ended up happening with the people that own gold and silver at the end of the cycle, when the cycle really hit its peak, they went around and bought a whole bunch of assets for nothing
Right.
because gold and silver was worth a tremendous amount. Like it just went way overboard. Everybody then at one point panicked and jumped into it at the end. But then he was like, well, now I'm gonna, sell off some of my gold and silver and buy a really nice property and things for myself that, I'm gonna benefit from. And so that is where like the gold and silver portion is huge, is to, insure yourself and then potentially prosper quite well, at the end of it, which is really exciting about that portion. But it's a little bit of a warning, like when George Gammon went to Argentina, is like if you don't have a network of people around you, that you just like he was ripped off left, right, and center trying to sell his gold and Bitcoin.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, so you really need to make sure that you have, a network of people around you that you could trust that, is not going to rip you off or that you have set up like let's do business there. I have a little bit of a network here in Manitoba, and so it's important that we have those little networks of people that we trust and that can give us what we need and so on without the needing to have any interactions with any government or any banking system potentially when really things get bad. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah, there's like you say, there's not really anywhere to run. So I mean
no,
Manitoba's great, but Alberta, Saskatchewan, like Western
yeah,
Canada, we're all hardy people. We live kind of close to nature. Um we're all producers. You're not all, but lots
except
of
for
us work.
Winnipeg
Yeah.
and the city, other cities.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the people I hang out with, like they're all smart, hardworking,
Yeah,
producing things. Like we have like with the greenhouse thing, we got like fresh fruits and vegetables, and then I do my freeze dried smoothie product that lasts 25 years. That's just I chose that business for a reason, right? It's like I don't
Yeah.
want, if nobody has any money to buy anything, I don't want something that goes bad or spoils or is a luxury item. It has to be a necessity. But
Yeah,
we also have like
it's a win-win.
it is, yeah. But
Yeah.
we just got some cattle and then pork and goats and chickens, and we're kind of covering our food groups, but and then again, I'm yeah, as one solution, I do that and do what I can, and then I try to share it so other people, I think you guys should be doing something, or here's some ideas or whatever. You
Yeah.
start a butcher shop over there, and you start, a
Value, yeah,
dairy processing.
value added businesses on top of it, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
because you got the production, that we're very good at here in the prairie provinces, like lots of production going on. And so if you could add some value added services like that onto here, and because now a lot of times it gets shipped somewhere else, for processing and so on. And so that is a way of, if there's any opportunity, I think in the next decades, it's potentially setting something like that up, especially when things starting to get bad, having local processing of food and so on. I think it probably would be a great business. What people is going to understand, I think, at one point is like all of this fake degrees and all the stuff that they created, in the cities. It's basically become a cesspool of unproductivity.
You can see it literally with the skyscraper commercial real estate we started this talk with. You can see it. The city is
Yeah,
dying. Like all
yeah,
it is government. Like don't jaywalk or you get $500 fine,
yeah,
and then homeless people and drug addicts and
yeah.
literally crap and garbage in the street. It is, and that's the city close to me. Like I couldn't imagine the big cities. Like no,
No,
thank you.
I
Yeah.
just drove through like Los Angeles. I was going on a tour to visit a whole bunch of friends. Actually, I visited Jedrick Griffin. That was very nice. But I drove through LA, a city. I didn't drive through like any of the bad streets or anything, but I just drove through like the main highway, and it was like taggings everywhere. It was like, holy smokes, what happened there? I was there like 7 years ago, and it was not that bad, to drive through, but it was like it looked like a shithole. Sorry for
Yeah.
the words, but it was like really bad. And then you get onto the countrysides of California, and actually, like it's beautiful little towns that people take care of.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but there's lots of production.
Yeah.
The key feature that they have on the countryside is, well, I visited a good friend of mine. He owns a farm. He's a rancher, and of course, he's a productive individual, and he can feed himself. If you could add, and I'm there on the food side kind of, but I'm not there on the meat side. I would really like to have that as a portion, but that probably brings me to have to add a little farm somewhere or something that I could, have animals, because I can't just fit. I can fit some chickens here, but I can't fit like cattle or anything. But it would be very important to have those things though, and then realize real things and real work is going to be the future of our civilization. Because when we got to the point where we basically thought that, oh, if I just take this loan out of the bank and then spend it on the stock market or buy something, assets go up, so it's great. But what ends up happening is the productive sector is dying up. I just interviewed a journalist, a farm journalist from Manitoba. He's fantastic. He's a famous farm journalist all over North America. But he was telling me, it's like the average farmer in Canada is, what was it, 65 years old.
Yeah.
And that is a serious predicament as well, guys. Like, listen, like we need food as a species.
Yeah.
If we don't get
Yeah.
that, we all gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you guys knew this, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That thing that you shove in your mouth might be important,
Yeah.
down the line. Yeah,
Uh, yeah, it's insane, man.
yeah,
Yeah, those are some good solutions. Those are mine as well.
yeah,
To protect myself and family from this. And I have three boys to feed, so yeah, so it's like seven cows, a herd of goats and pigs, and
yeah,
you need it. You actually need it. It's
yeah,
surprising how much a person eats, but
yeah.
um, so past
And
past
good
that,
wholesome food, real
it's
food.
right. Oh yes, like my wife, we can't eat soft serve ice cream because there's essentially no dairy in there. Like the whipping cream you get, there's no cream in it, right? It's insane. It's
Yeah.
actually insane. So yeah, we eat lots of butter, lots of tallow and lard and meat and vegetables, right? And
Yeah.
life
It's
is
very
good.
dangerous, that meat. I actually, let me tell you, I'm on carnivore diet right now.
Yeah,
And so I'm not eating it. I'm just eating fat,
yeah.
meat, and protein. So it's
It's
like,
so good
yeah,
for you.
everybody,
Yeah,
my sister's sister-in-laws are nurses, and they were like, "You're gonna die." Like, this
yeah,
is terrible. It's like I'm eating the worst meat, the red meat, the beef. I'm eating
yeah,
a raw sirloin almost, like not raw, but like a really nice rare
yeah.
sirloin. And it's like the best. Actually, when you go and look it up, guys. The amount of nutrients in meat is ridiculous, actually.
Yeah, it
It's
is. And make sure they say sodium's bad for you. Put lots of salt on it.
yeah,
It's like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
meat smothered
Yeah.
in butter with salt, and you could probably live off of that. It's like whatever the opposite is that they say. It's like
Yeah,
this.
and it's
No, I want tofu
yeah.
smothered in margarine
But then
with
it
no
comes down
salt.
to, are they doing that to just like make us dumber? And probably.
The dumber the population, then they vote a
Yeah.
certain way, and then they can continue the Ponzi scheme until the
Yeah.
end comes. So
Yeah.
you don't
That's
want
why
to
we need
kill.
to ban meat.
Yeah, you actually don't want to get rid of the slaves. You just want to dumb them down so they don't rise up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because
That's the
if
whole
you
thing.
get rid of too many, well, I guess Canada hasn't taken that note. They got their MAID program, but
Yeah, yeah, right. Ugh.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, yeah.
but anyways, yeah, we're
Yeah.
getting pretty long here, but back to economics. Yeah,
Yeah.
gold and silver maybe, but look after your own stuff first, what you need, like
Yeah.
food and energy maybe, and um
Food and energy is number one, and water. Like, take care of those first
yeah,
before you think of anything else, and then
that's
have
right.
have reserve money also as well, like a little bit of cash even, and then you have your gold and silver. Take care of that first, because you got to take care of feeding yourself, guys, before you can have all the gold and silver you want. And if you can't get rid of it at one point to buy the stuff, because none of the peasants understand it, the small people, when you buy big assets, it's fine to transfer wealth, but yeah, so make sure you have that first, because that is number one key. You got to survive.
Yeah, exactly. I am not a Bitcoin guy. Let's not delve too deep into it, but what's your thoughts briefly on
Well, I think,
cryptocurrency and
yeah,
blockchain? So,
I think it's a great way of transferring wealth outside of the system. I kind of like it now. Bitcoin is very like open, and so there's a lot of tracking that could go on, and with Bitcoin and the ledger,
mhm.
that it's on. So a little bit risky with tracking. So I have some privacy cryptos that I do, and that's a like I yeah, though it's still like a great way of transferring wealth without having a whole bunch of gold and silver with you and going over a border and all that stuff. If you wanted to do that, to do something, if you wanted to go internationally, definitely like it's a great medium of of transfer of wealth. I would say, but I have both. Like, but I have a tremendous amount more in precious metals. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, it's I just haven't got from the very beginning when I first learned about the cryptos, I didn't get into it because it's fundamentally it doesn't have any value in and of itself on its own. But I can see if I want to escape the border guards to this prison we know as Canada and get out and to take gold and silver with you, it's like, no, 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 we're
Well,
gonna
well,
take that.
I have a friend of mine with a snowmobile in Montana.
There you go. Yeah. But
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
when I think of
Yeah.
a crypto that it's not or it's easy to transport something because it's nothing really, but it's also in a funny sense that Quadriga CX, one of the big exchanges years ago in Canada, the $100 I put in to just see how it all worked initially, that's gone because that was
Oh yeah.
stolen, right? It's
Yeah.
and all
I
these
used
exchanges and
Quadriga 6 a lot before, and I was
yeah.
just out of it when it happened, so I really
Oh,
lucked
lucky
out.
you. Yeah. But
Uh,
anyways, if
yeah.
that's what floats your boat, my personal recommendation is go with precious metals or things that exist with
Real
value,
things. Real
but
things are
real
easier
things.
to understand. Yeah.
That's yeah, yeah, for me too. It's okay. Even talked about solutions. Okay, really briefly, housing uh, and immigration into Canada. So massive amount of immigration lately. House prices, it's in a super bubble. I think the average house is over 700,000 Canadian dollars for the average house.
Yeah.
Um, where you and I live, it's not in a hyper bubble. We're like
Yeah.
yeah, backwards community or not in a big city. Don't have those problems. But what do you
Yeah.
think? Is real estate going to go up? Is it a bubble, or is it going to come down reasonably, or what's going
Why?
on?
Well, I see a point where, like, yeah, I could add all this immigration, but who's going to have jobs? Like, where are we going to have the jobs? We're entering into a recession. You know, the government
Yeah,
is getting bigger. Oh, let the government hire all these new immigrants. Yeah, that's such a great idea. You know, like, let's grow the government sector even further. That'd probably be the only way out of it, really, like to employ a lot of these people that are coming over. Like, it's pretty insane numbers. Like now. Germany also have big numbers. They have 2 million, but they're over double the amount of us. Now we take in over 1 million, and that is a
yeah.
substantial amount of new people that are coming in. But a lot of them seems to be like, well, what the heck? You guys promised us this, but there's nothing here.
It,
There's no opportunity.
I've been watching and been sent YouTubes and TikToks and stuff of newer immigrants to Canada that had this fantasy of coming to Canada to be successful and stuff. And after not very long, but they literally come out and say everything I was told was a lie. I'm trying to get home, and a lot of them, I personally know quite a few who have come here and they're selling everything after
Yeah,
they realize the lie and they're going back home, whether it's the Philippines or whatever
yeah,
country, for their better quality of life because it was a lie. But one of the little personal red pill moments I had, John, was I had one of my rentals in the city a very long time ago now, but it was a two-bedroom rental, and I sold that to newer immigrants that came over, and the agent, after they purchased the house, told me that 14 of them moved into a two-bedroom house, and that's kind of they're pretty comfortable with that, right? Well, now a new
yeah,
immigrant will work work a full-time job and can literally only afford rent and utilities in like a crummy basement suite,
yeah,
right? So I always thought if 14 people can live in a two-bedroom house, but 14 people cannot eat the same plate of food. So I kind of switched to the food industry because
yeah,
housing, there's people still living in some larger houses, and between the property tax and inflation, they're probably not going to be able to afford that. So maybe they'll bring in their cousin and their brother and their parents and their grandkids or something into the house. So that's kind of what I picture with real estate actually. So myself, I switched to the food industry because you can't share a plate of food amongst 20 people, right? They still
yeah.
need to eat. But
Well, yeah, if this
anyways,
continues, we'll probably end up with like huge, fusion, like I forgot what they call them again, but huge families again, living under a
which would
roof.
be good,
Yeah.
actually good thing. So yeah,
Yeah, I actually grew up with my grandmother living like right next door in the same kind of house. And
yeah,
so and that's totally fine. I learned lots of great things from my my elderly grandmother. She taught me to bake and we killed chickens
yeah.
together. She was you don't play around with the old ladies, farm ladies. So
Oh yeah, for sure.
but yeah, no, it's I don't see why we're mistreating, our elders so bad. We're shoving them into these poorly run, government a lot of times funded homes, and so they're just getting abused and used, and nobody cares about them. Like now, of course, my I'm lucky with my wife's family side there. They really take well care of each other here. But like other than that, there's a lot of it where like yeah, I seen when I visited these old folks' homes, old people that sit by themselves and like have nobody because
Mhm.
they don't care about them anymore. And that's very sad. That's one thing we can learn from a lot of immigrants is like actually taking a little bit better care of, the people that actually brought us up and brought us onto this earth.
Yeah. Well,
Really.
I
So,
definitely instill that in my boys at an early age. Like when they ask questions about the future, I say someday you might meet a good girl and or a nice girl, get married and have kids, and then I'll be the grandpa and stuff. And well, where are you going to live, Dad? Are you going to still live with me? I said, I'll live really close to you. You'll probably want your own little house, but Dad will be right beside you, kind of thing. And we kind of instill that, but
well, a
it's
lot
all a
of
good thing.
farmers do that
Yeah.
though already, right? Which is nice. Like it's a
Yeah.
lot of like I see that. Like I live a lot around a lot of farms here, and there's lots of that where the young kids maybe they move a little bit away from the farm, but they're still like very close,
Very
and
close.
so
Yeah.
you get a lot of that community, and the countryside is great for that. It
Yeah.
still has remnants of that, which is what we need. Like when you get crammed into all these cities, like look at other major. It's interesting as a civil species and civilization, we move to centralize over time, and then you get these great, like, grandiose, like civilizations, and then they disappear. What happens, do you think, to those cities? And I talked to actually a climate historian back. He was from the University of Manitoba. Actually, I had him at an event in Arizona called An Inconvenient Lie. It was hosted by Ed Griffin and a bunch of us. And Timothy Ball was his name. Just a great guy. He passed away now. But we had a great conversation one day. I sat down with him for 9 hours. And I was a monetary historian, but he also understood money. And then we talked about climate and civilization and so on. And so when you can't feed yourself, like the civilization dies like this. But the problem is a lot of civilizations move into cities, forget how to feed themselves,
Yeah.
literally. And
Yep.
so that is kind of a warning. And that's why we're seeing like the slow trickle out of the cities now. Because we're getting back to that point. Not that we never really collapse per se, but it's just like the big city structure. It's just like you can't run it anymore.
Oh yeah, and it's not a nice place to be. So that's I try to share what I'm doing for maybe I should be keeping it all a secret and stuff, but I feel that I'm doing some good things and I'm going to speak at a conference, a local conference and
Oh,
expand
nice.
that kind of stuff next weekend and I don't know, my YouTube stuff, just sharing what I'm doing, what I think works, what doesn't, and actually some smart it's a good community that I created, even the YouTube thing. But
Well, just
uh
think about it
yeah,
this way, Dean. It's like I when I'm on the countryside, when I wake up in the morning, I don't hear almost any cars at all. Like, and you hear the birds chirping. I take that. Like, I tried to live in the city here when I first came over and moved with my wife. Like, we lived
yeah,
there for a year and a half. I just almost like I was in panic because I grew up on a kind of a semi farm where I was from, Norway, with 20 houses like spread out. So, I just can't take that noise and everything. I just love the nature, and
yeah,
I think if you connect like real self-sustainability, not the crap that you hear on all these elites talking about, but actually real self-sustainability and self-reliance of people. I think that will bring our species to another great level because now we have technology, and don't you ever think that technology is going to go all the way? Like we actually probably will go to Mars without gigantic cities. We don't really need them these
yeah,
days.
yeah. It's so I mean, in
Yeah.
this global debt-based fiat Ponzi scheme that's destined 100% to collapse, in my opinion. It's not all bad. You move out of the
No.
country, you are closer to your family. You're going to eat better food. Your health is going to increase. You're going to get more exercise from gardening and things. You're going to drink well water and it's going to have lots of minerals in it. And you're going to listen to the birds chirp. You're going to watch the deer. You're not going to have to commute to work. It's wonderful. Societal collapse could be wonderful in a lot of ways. So it's
Yeah.
not all bad. Yeah.
No. I'm still in the commuting part, but I do enjoy having the just like when I can be by myself in the garden and enjoy it. So like it's worth every penny. And it's actually super cheap, guys, to live on the countryside.
Yeah.
If you have one of those stupid homes in a big city, sell it for a little bit of loss and move on the countryside. And if you can, have a little bit of a business or something going, like you're set.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good life. No regrets, and my
Yeah.
wife is better for it. My kids are better for it, and and it's great. But well, yeah, this is getting a little long here.
Yeah.
To close up, John, you wanted to talk about one really cool project that you're working on
Yeah.
called the Outernet, which is privacy P2P communications. Let's hear about this. I'm interested.
Yeah, so I worked with some well actually I got to meet the guy in regards he was a gold and silver, like he owned a website where you could search for private vaulting services in several countries.
Okay.
And this guy, he was like, I found out later, he's actually a programmer, and he knows another programmer that's way more intelligent than any of us. But this guy, like when they had fun, like trying to communicate privately and so on, they developed a system that is using basically BitTorrents to connect people, and then basically, so it would be like you put literally put in a link in a browser, and then that link will then bring you to a room where you have either video chat, there's like group chat functions, there's telephone functions. We're actually building something called the Outernet Explorer, just to piss Bill Gates off.
I like it. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, but what it is, it's in a very simple term, guys. I think it's going to be revolutionary. The guy that is a part of this and the head developer, he was basically said he was involved with Bitcoin in the early stages. He said Bitcoin is going to become huge, and then he a year before ChatGPT came out, he said like just wait and see, like AI is just going to take over. But now he's created something like that are way better. Actually, we call it web. All the guys that are on the blockchain train, they think that blockchain is the future. It's actually not. It's what we are creating is called Web 4.0. So we skipped over them.
Oh,
And
good for
we're
you. Yeah.
basically creating a complete decentralized, because if you run something on a blockchain, it's very slow and it takes a lot of data and lots of power to use it. But what we're going to use is a simple little it's a simple little file that somebody could upload to a website. It's a JavaScript, like a tiny little file, 32 kilobytes. You put it up on a website, and then people actually go to a link, and then they get a random little hashtag and a address after. They could share that link with someone, and then they can then have a private connection with someone, and real 100% true private connection, because you can't really say that today, with another person, peer to peer. So if we made the call, I would basically be directly connected to your phone or to your computer via my computer or my phone. And so it's a complete direct connection. And that browser has nothing. It just makes the connection, and then there's nothing else. The connection is then between the two devices. So it's really amazing. Like it's truly amazing, actually. It's
Yeah.
really, really, really exciting. So I think it's just going to revolutionize, because everybody's complaining about privacy and all the big social media and so on. Well, we're doing something about it. Let's leave it at that. Like something real about it. Real solution. You built a farm for yourself and a greenhouse. Well, here comes technological solutions to go away from the centralized, data centers owned by Google or Facebook and all those guys. No, we don't need them. We just need our computers and our phones. We can directly connect, and we don't care about no surveillance from government or from corporate surveillance through like spying on you and using your data. Because what ends up happening is when you have that direct connection, the only thing the government will know is if you have a video communication or if you have a talk communication, but they can't interrupt it because you have it privately, and that's it. So it's like very, very unique.
Yeah.
We're about to launch it in a few weeks. Hopefully, it will be actually online. So, but everybody could actually go if you go to Outer with two R's, Outer .net. You will actually find a whole bunch of links to different things, and I could send you some links so you could try it. But it's basically so you could have a private video chat with anybody that you care about, that you don't want anybody else to hear or know. And real, true privacy is coming back to civilization.
I love it. Yeah, there's the other
Yeah.
apps like your WhatsApp, your WeChat,
Oh,
your Signal, your Telegram. That is
yeah.
not secure. Story after
Yeah.
story, not at all. And then What you explaining that to me, I was just thinking, oh, like I know a lot of guys with ham radios and stuff, and that's sending a radio frequency that essentially anybody can intercept. So as long
Yeah.
as you have internet connection and then your
Yeah.
system, it's even more secure than like a ham radio thing for.
Well, we're working on some crazy stuff like that. We even want to be able to use the radio signal to transfer the data
Oh,
in the
cool.
ham
Yeah.
radio.
Yeah. That sounds really you might be onto
Yeah.
something, John. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
put that link in
Yeah.
the description. Everybody can check it out. I'm gonna check it out myself too. John, thanks so much for doing this with me. We delved into the weeds there. I enjoyed the conversation. I learned a few things. Where can people find you? Is it the economictruth.org?
Yeah, that's it. That very simple. And
Okay,
check out the outer.net, and like that's it. That's all you need to know. You'll find all my links to everything. I have a Telegram thing that I post news articles on. So, but you find all my social media, everything that I do on the Economic Truth. Very simple.
perfect. Well, I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody got some value out of this. So thank you very much, John, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
You bet.